Meet our leading lady, Davina, who used to think the world was magic. Her life was one long party that never ended. Her parents gave her everything and she never asked where it came from. She adored them so much that she couldn't see who they really were until it was late. Her parents had enemies, or perhaps, they were someone else's enemies. Either way, there was a reckoning, and she was left behind. Her parents lost their lives in a fire incident and she was entrusted to the care of her nanny, Bremerton, who offered to teach her how to be strong, not just for herself but to protect other children too. With fierce determination, she agreed to go with the nanny. So, she spent the next 8 years at the Elite Nanny Academy building her strength. Mrs. Bremerton took her in, raised her, trained her, and now she's headmistress of the Elite Nanny Academy, and Davina is finally ready for her first assignment. One day at the headmistress Bremerton's office, a young handsome man named Mr. Angelini emerges with a generous proposal to hire a nanny. Due to his proposed salary offer, the headmistress offers to provide him with one of their top performers with over a decade of experience, but he interjects saying he requires exclusivity, specifically someone who has never worked with anyone else. So, she takes out a bunch of documents, mentioning that they are her most recent graduates all awaiting their first assignment. With a deep breath, she explains that each of her graduates has mastered the core pillars of the Elite Nanny program, which includes early childhood development and psychology, first aid, defensive combat, advanced driving, physical and cyber security, household management, financial planning, and politics. Amid her lengthy list, she halts and poses a question. Mr. Angelini, why are you seeking an elite nanny? This question takes him down memory lane as he remembers the hassle of catering for his son. His reply? The usual reason, his son's mother isn't in the picture and his company doesn't provide childcare. The headmistress ensures him that his son will be in good hands, seeing that they have excellent candidates for the job. Then, she asks him what he's looking for specifically in the employee, so he slides out a particular document which turns out to be Davina's, saying he wants her. The headmistress informs him that Davina's specialty is cybersecurity and inquires if he has a large home network to oversee, which he affirms negatively. Following this, she says she wouldn't recommend her for the job and proceeds to recommend other nannies, but the young man sticks to his choice. Later that day, as Davina makes her way to Mrs. Bremerton's office, she tries to motivate herself by saying that somewhere out there, a child needs protecting, and then she swings the door open, calling out Headmistress Bremerton. The headmistress informs her that she's been offered an assignment, and Davina, who's excited about it, asserts that she's been ready for such a day. However, the headmistress remarks that she wouldn't have chosen this offer for her and that she was hand-selected by the client. When Davina inquires who the client is, she's shocked to learn that it is Gabriel Angelini, a mafia, with the name ringing a bell too. The headmistress begs her not to take the job and also says that she is bound to convey the offer, but she still urges her to refuse. But in the actual sense, how can she possibly refuse her first assignment after all Mrs. Bremerton has done for her? She recalls her childhood incident and readily agrees to take the assignment. This action prompts the headmistress to ask if she's taking the offer for the right reasons and not her past. She replies by saying that's exactly why she has to take it. Besides, if Angelini has a child, then the child needs protection. Inwardly, she adds that if she learns the truth of what happened on the day she lost her parents, then it's all better. In another scene, Angelini asks Headmistress Bremerton if the person he chose has signed the contract, and she affirms while Davina strides with her luggage to the scene. The headmistress introduces her to her employer, but standing in front of him, she's lost in thoughts, forcing the young man to ask if she can speak. That's when she snaps out of her musing and introduces herself whilst stretching out her hand for a handshake. After the introduction, he tells her to join him in the car when she's ready, leaving her alone with the headmistress. In preparation for the job, Headmistress Bremerton asks her of her Elite Nanny Academy orders, and she begins listing them: protect and care for the charge, obey the primary client, and anticipate the family's needs. The headmistress therefore reminds her of the rest of them, after which she promises to make her proud. While they stand there, a guy named Adam comes to help Davina take in her suitcase, and as they walk to the car, he issues her a piece of advice to not let her employer scare her. On entering the car, she's shocked to realize that there are actually going to be two people with her. With the need to comport herself, she wears a smile and asks the little boy if he's Mr. Angelini's son, and he replies by introducing himself as Michelle, which his father corrects to Mikey. The little boy whispers to his father saying he doesn't trust his new nanny and that she smells like oranges, forcing Davina to sniff herself. She asks Mikey where they are headed while she takes out her laptop, and he explains that it's a big ugly mansion in a city of peasants. His father also shares that they just relocated from Venice to Lyon. Seeing her need to use the laptop, Angelini offers her the car Wi-Fi should she need it, but she immediately realizes that the Wi-Fi is unsecured. Just as they're about to move, Angelini mentions that they don't drive with the doors unlocked because it's not safe, but she defensively replies that if there's an accident, it's safer to have the doors unlocked. However, he still insists that if someone tries to snatch his son at a stoplight, then it's not safe. Davina stares pondering on how his smart car Wi-Fi is unsecured, yet he lectures her about safety. Subsequently, Mikey turns to her and asks what she's doing, but gets no reply, so he turns back to his father to tell him that the nanny is tricky. Clicking the buttons on the laptop, she turns to her employer and advises that if he's so concerned with locking things, he should put a password on his Wi-Fi. They finally arrive at the Angelini annex, and Adam instructs her to go with her employer while he gets her bag. As they walk in, she takes note of the surroundings, and it's beyond her expectations, because there is no visible security, not even cameras. On entering the house, he directs her to her room and tells his son that henceforth, he'll be with Davina and go to her for everything, and there will be no more ride-alongs. The little boy thinks his father is trying to ice him out because he thinks he can't handle the business. They argue for a while and Mikey runs out of the house screaming his hate for his father. Seeing all this, Davina tells Angelini that his son seems very attached to him and asks if his son knows what he does. Surprised, he asks her if she herself knows and she responds by saying she read the news, which simplifies things for Angelini. With a decision to be honest, he reveals that he's the underboss of the Angelini Mafia and he has more enemies than he can count. He also mentions that these enemies would do anything to get their hands on his only son, the heir to the Angelini name, and that's where she comes in. Following this explanation, he thinks they shouldn't have any problems, but she cuts in, inquiring about any other duties she will have. She begins enlisting her capabilities, but he doesn't deem it necessary as her only job is Mikey. She still insists that keeping his son safe requires more than just childcare. Other factors like the physical security of his residence are to be considered too, but he makes it clear that her only duty is to not let his son out of her sight. Since this is what her job entails, she definitely has somewhere to be as Mikey is not in her sight at the moment. As she strides outside, she sees some men taking the little boy, but before she can catch up, they zoom off in a van. What? A kidnapping on the first day of her job? This doesn't look good at all. She dashes back to tell Angelini that some masked kidnappers took Mikey from the driveway, but he immediately grabs her and orders her to go after them. She grabs her bag and requests for the car keys, but he informs her that Adam will drive her. Just as she's about to leave, she ensures him that his son will be found, but in the meantime, he should call the police. Leaning toward her, he says that if she does her job well, he won't have to call the police. While they are on their way, she keeps giving Adam directions while tracking the license plate of the van. They finally arrive at the building, and she orders Adam to pull around to the front of the building and wait for her while she does her thing. She notices the guard at the door appears to be a professional, but he's strangely without a gun, which she finds very unusual. So, she approaches him and warns that she's well trained before ordering him to open the door, which he obviously declines. Before we know it, she attacks the man and defeats him, causing him to slump, and then she steps into the building, equipping herself with a weapon. She peeks through a door only to find Mikey tied up, with two people present in that room. The door swings open as she bursts in and maneuvers both of them, hastily carrying Mikey to the car. She unties him as she inquires about his well-being. This particular moment reminds her of her past, so she hugs him and ensures that everything is okay now. Almost immediately, Adam sighs while commenting on feeling like a jerk. Suddenly, he points a gun at her, orders her to get out of the car and leave Mikey behind, and also offers her $2 million in the case. Taken aback by this sudden change, she questions if he's with the kidnappers, and just then, he reveals that Gabriel Angelini hired those thugs to test her. Clicking the gun, he orders her again to take the money and leave, but she disagrees. Just as he's about to pull the trigger, she overpowers him, carries Mikey, jumps out of the car, and starts running back home. The little boy can't help but commend her bravery thus far. Upon her arrival, she notices that the car Adam used was already at home, and at that moment, Mikey quickly runs to his father standing outside. Angelini congratulates her for passing the test, and then it dawns upon her that all of Adam's role was also part of the test. Mikey tugs his father's shirt to tell him that he thinks Davina is good, fast, and scary, plus she even hugged him. Surrounded by several shocking events, she asks her employer if he got his son in on the plot, and he returns the question asking if she would prefer the little boy be taken unaware and traumatized. Angered, she says she'd prefer if he didn't question her abilities, but he clarifies the air by explaining that he doesn't doubt her training, but he just had to know that she couldn't be bought or scared off. Furthermore, he mentions that people will try to buy or scare her off. Besides, it has happened before, but she still insists that if she's going to care for his son, he has to trust her, but we all know a mafia can't trust anything or anyone. To explain his reason for his distrust, he tells her that if she pulls the police reports, it'll say that his wife has been missing for a year, but what they don't include is that she was actually assassinated. Seeing Mikey's reaction to this statement, Davina asks her employer if it's the best place to have such a conversation, so he instantly orders Mikey upstairs, but he declines. To distract the little boy, Davina inquires about the location of his room and he sprints to show her his room himself. As she runs after him, Angelini whispers a time and venue to continue his narration to her. Seeing how she goes along with Mikey, Adam can't help but express his likeness for this particular nanny, and then he advises his boss to try not to scare her off, but Angelini remains firm in his belief that if she can be scared off, she doesn't belong with them. Still on their way to the room, Mikey asserts his firm belief that Davina tricked him, but she responds saying she didn't and she only wants to see his room. Following his reaction after she mentions that she's going to judge him based on what she finds inside the room, she feels less worried. Before this time, she was a bit worried because the little boy handled the kidnapping rather too well, but it gladdens her to know that he can still act like a kid. As they approach the room, Mikey explains that the room is messy, and they've only been there for a few weeks. Also, some of the things currently in his room are from their old house, and they are all baby stuff. He appears rather shy and embarrassed about how untidy the room is. As they enter, Davina's nanny vision activates as she notices several things in the room. His chocolate milk habit that appears to be out of control. He has more suits than a pallbearer, his creative outlet for underlying issues, and then her inward recommendations for all these are, less sugar, play clothes, and dedicated art time. Mikey notices her looking around, so he quickly states that he hasn't finished unpacking yet because they aren't staying long, but she cuts in asking if it isn't long enough to pick up his milk boxes, and this makes him assert that the new housekeeper doesn't like him. "Who wouldn't like you?" she asks, as she rubs his head, but he instantly slaps her hand off of him saying that he doesn't need a new mama. Ah. The little boy must be hurting from his mom's demise. But she says to herself that no one will ever replace his mom and she's not here to try either, she's just here to care for him. Then, she tells him that she can be as close or far as he needs her to, but he interrupts her saying she should just do her job. Following her salute to his order, he instructs her to just go find his father instead, causing her to march out of his room. Such a weird lady, isn't she? As she walks out of his room, she remarks on how stubborn he is, and how much he's hurting also. She knocks at the venue given to her by Angelini, only to discover that he has changed his clothes, and doesn't seem too scary for an underboss. She reports that she left Mikey in his room and asks if it's okay that way, and he replies by telling her that she can leave his side for short periods, as long as he's in the house. Deciding to cut to the heart of the situation, Davina inquires if whoever murdered his wife is also a threat to his son, and he affirms. Then, she remarks that this assignment is outside the purview of her contract, and his application failed to mention active threats against his family. However, He thinks that it shouldn't be a problem because she's trained in defensive combat, but she counters by saying that she's a new graduate and he should have hired a senior operator. With a head bump, he mentions that he hired exactly who he meant to, but what does that mean, she asks. Silently wondering if he knows about her past and that she's here to find answers. Angelini insists that he won't settle for anyone else, so she should make her demands. Considering that she's realized the assignment is more dangerous than she signed on for, he asks if it'll take more money for her to stay. Davina, in her musings again mentions that she was going to make demands, but now it feels like she's playing into his hand, whereas Angelini keeps making generous offers. Thinking to herself, she says that none of his offers is of any use if she loses her life on this assignment or disappears conveniently afterward, but on second thought, why is he so determined to make her stay? She finally makes her demand, and guess what? She seeks complete access to his entire life, claiming that if she's going to protect his son, she needs to be the closest person to them both. With a smile, he asks her if she thinks he'll be impressed with her selfless work ethic, but she yells saying she wants to survive this assignment, which means having the tools to do it the right way. Then, he reveals that there are some things he can't give her access to, like business accounts and client data, but she interjects saying she has no interest in his business, and she won't look at anything she doesn't need to, which are obvious lies. Still not convinced, he probes further, asking what she really wants, and then she finally reveals that she has a more personal request, which is a guaranteed good review. She explains that she'll put her life on the line for his son, and if he's safe when her one-year contract is over, he'll give her full marks and he'll become an angel-level patron of the Elite Nanny Academy. Taken aback by her demands, he asks if she always dreams so small, but she stands firm in her request. With this, Angelini pledges that in 1 year, when it's time to leave Lion, he'll sign any recommendation she writes, but if, however, any harm were to befall his son, she'll wish she'd lost her life protecting him. This subtle threat causes a moment of reflection within Davina. She takes note of his gaze as he says those words, and he means every bit of it because his eyes say it all. He would slowly snatch life out of her, but the good thing is that an elite nanny never fails, or so she thinks. She steps out of the room and sees Adam carrying her bags. Though she offers to take them herself, he insists that she has already done enough heavy lifting for the day. He suggests she have a look around the house since it'll be her home for the next year unless something goes horribly wrong. As she tours the house, she notices how fancy it looks, and then she bumps into the guard she had beaten up earlier during Mikey's rescue. Still touring the mansion, she can't help but observe the 10-foot walls topped with wire, the glowering guards, and fussy fountains which are not exactly a young boy's playground. She strides into a room, supposedly hers, and just as she's about to charge her laptop, she discovers that it's not in her bag and then recalls she left it in the car. Just then, Angelini steps in inquiring if she's coming to dinner, but she asks for her laptop instead, and he promises to remind Adam when he gets back with the car. While they walk past Mikey's room to the dining together, she asks him if she should bring Mikey down, but he declines, saying that he's elected to eat in his room for the night. So, she tries lecturing Angelini about his son's challenges and feelings, but he cuts in angrily, saying he doesn't need her to explain his son's feelings to him, rather she should worry about his safety and nothing more. All the while, the little boy stands by the door eavesdropping on their conversation without their knowledge, but Davina's eyes catch sight of his shadow lurking behind the door. Now seated at the table faced with the awkward silence, Davina inwardly says that the Elite Nanny Academy never covered making small talk with her employer, and so, she initiates a conversation by asking Angelini about his reason for being in Lion. With a stern gaze, he replies saying it's for business. All through their conversation, she only bothers about him not being remorseful for putting his son at risk, which brings her to ask what goals he has for Mikey for the year. He hesitates for a moment and then says that he'll think about it. More so, as the Angelini heir, Mikey has certain expectations to live up to. His response and demeanor seems odd to her, but then, what isn't odd about the whole house? The ghost-like staff who she's seen around the house, but only met the driver, and now she's the only one eating with the boss. Perhaps, because it is her first night, hence the empty gesture of welcome. However, she decides to play along, so she inquires what Mikey normally does during the day. The mafia boss replies by saying that he normally takes him to work with him, but Davina says that's going to end today. The scraping sound of his chair echoes as he rises from his seat and tells her to follow him without spilling any other word. They go outside and he pulls her to a corner, instructing her not to apologize, but rather appear scared. He leans toward her while grabbing her tightly, causing her to flinch, and then he reminds her that she asked whether he has goals for his son, but just as he's about to tell her the goal, one of his men approach him to inform him that there's trouble lurking in District 3. So, he quickly retreats from Davina and tells her that they'd continue their conversation later. This action makes her wonder what he was about to say and why he's afraid of anyone else hearing it. The next morning, Mikey, who's already awake, engages in a seemingly fake conversation with his teddy bear, or should I say a rehearsal for the Angelini lifestyle? Anyway, Davina comes into his room to inform him that breakfast is ready, but he insists on taking it in his room again. Then she reminds him that he had dinner in his room the night before and asks if he's afraid to eat human food in front of her. Perplexed, the little boy probes about the term human food, but she seizes the opportunity to jest and insinuate that he's a vampire, and that's why he avoids going outside and eats where no one else can see his fangs. Little Mikey tries to defend himself by saying that he isn't a vampire, only that he doesn't just want to eat with her, but she assures him that there's no need to worry, because she already ate, so the kitchen is his alone. Then she exits his room. Much later, as the nanny does the dishes, she recounts that this is Mikey's first breakfast downstairs since her arrival, which means a good job on her side. While she continues with the chore, an old lady walks into the kitchen questioning her identity and presence in the kitchen, and she replies informing her that she'll be in charge of breakfast and lunch for Mikey henceforth. She also promises to try not to be in her way. The old woman inquires about her well-being, and she assures her that everything is fine, even though she knows that she couldn't sleep a wink last night. When Davina asks the woman if she has seen her laptop by any chance, the woman replies by advising her to read some books instead. Amid their banter, Mr. Angelini steps out requesting his coffee. His eyes catch the gaze of the nanny staring at him, and he's forced to ask if there's a problem, but she declines and suggests checking on his son. She walks away wondering what he was going to tell her about his son last night and wishes she had her laptop. Immediately she steps into the room, she sees the laptop sitting on the desk. She quickly opens up because she has been dying to do some research about him. As she embarks on it, so many discoveries come to play. The Angelinis have been running the Venetian mafia for nearly a century, and the current Don is Gabriel Angelini's uncle, who took the reins after the passing of his older brother. The Don has no sons, which explains why his nephew is the underboss, and that leaves Mikey heir to everything. She decides to delve deeper into the research, but Mikey interrupts, seeking her help. She rushes to his room only to find him ransacking his luggage. He says that he and his father are going on an overnight trip and he can't find his favorite tie. She looks at him feeling sorry because she knows he won't be joining his father, and so she tries to convince him to stay back while his father goes on his trip. The little child insists that his father will need his help because he's meeting the Croatian syndicate and they control lots of the major smuggling routes in France, plus they hate the Angelinis. He reveals that people tend to underestimate his father when he's with him, which is part of their edge, so he holds her hands and begs her to back him up. Just then, his father stops by the room and urges him to be good to Davina while he's away till the next night, but grabs his bag informing him that he's almost packed and coming with him. His father tells him that he'd be staying behind, where it's safe, but Mikey tries to convince him to tag along. Mr. Angelini, however, remains steadfast in his decision for his son to stay behind. Just when he's about to leave the room, Davina halts him, and we can see the look in the little child's eyes, hoping for backup from her, but she fails him by requesting access to his father's security system instead. Mikey pulls his bag back feeling disappointed, and as she tries to talk to him, he angrily sends her out of his room with teary eyes. She tries to apologize, but he pushes her out of the room, saying that there's nothing fun about being left behind, and then he slams the door right behind her. Standing outside the room, she quickly recalls the fire incident from her childhood and supports the notion that indeed there's nothing fun about being left behind.
As Davina retires to her room, she struggles to fall asleep. Despite thoroughly searching for cameras and finding none, she can't shake off the eerie feeling of being watched. Frustrated, she dresses in her work clothes and tries to convince herself that her room is just as perfect as the rest of the house, though she remains suspicious that something isn't right. She steps onto the balcony, takes in the weather, and starts looking up local parks in Lyon on her laptop. Once done, she heads to Mikey's room to check if he's ready for breakfast, but he declines, still upset with her. Trying to smooth things over, she tells him they can go to a park after breakfast. Just as he's about to refuse again, he pauses and asks, "Which park?" She lists a few options, but he dismisses them as too small and smelly. He then mentions his favorite park in the middle of the city. Davina hesitates, noting it's a bit far, but Mikey insists, highlighting its many trees and other features. With an adorable look, he shares that his father sometimes takes him there to watch the ducks. Moved by his sweetness, Davina agrees to his request and promises to go there after breakfast. At the park, Davina sits back, watching Mikey feed the ducks. Lost in thought, she realizes how much Mikey misses his dad, even though he hasn't been gone for a full day. After a while, Mikey asks for ice cream. Davina reminds him it's almost lunchtime, but considers his good behavior. He pleads with those irresistible eyes until she agrees to let him have a scoop. She points to a nearby ice cream stand, but Mikey insists on going to the one in the old quarter that sells pistachio chocolate chip. Hand in hand, they walk to the place. As she takes her hand off his to accept the ice cream, Mikey bolts off. Before she can react, Mikey is gone. Meanwhile, in a car, Angelini receives a call from Venice. It's the Don, Angelini's uncle, and they discuss the Croatians for a bit before the Don raises a toast to Mikey. Back in the old quarter, Mikey is running as fast as he can. He manages to hop on a bus heading to the train station just as Davina starts searching for him. Realizing the severity of the situation, she decides it's time to activate the nanny mode. As Mikey sits on the bus with his eyes closed, he's startled by Davina's voice asking if he's headed somewhere. Just 18 minutes earlier, Davina had been busy analyzing all of Mikey's possible escape routes and destinations. She had overheard some strangers mention a cute child in a little suit and questioned them about whether this boy had boarded a bus. When the lady confirmed, Davina's Elite Nanny Academy training kicked in. She quickly borrowed a young man's bicycle and sped off to catch the bus. Meanwhile, Mikey is blissfully unaware of the chase and relaxes on the bus. Davina arrives just in time, boards the bus, and catches Mikey off guard. Grabbing him by the collar, she sternly informs him that his ice cream privileges are revoked. Mikey, more concerned about his wrinkling suit, struggles and screams for her to let him go. Suddenly, he slips to the ground and declares his hatred for her, crying that his father would have gone along with him if she weren't around. Davina reassures him that her job is to protect him, hinting that he doesn't understand the dangers of running off alone. Despite Davina's efforts to calm him, Mikey insists that his father is in danger because he's alone. The nanny reminds him that his father has bodyguards, whom Mikey refers to as traitors. He yells that his father can't trust the bodyguards after what happened to his mom, and his uncle always says they can only trust family. Davina tries to comfort him, acknowledging that what happened to his mother was terrible and likely the security team did their best. But Mikey cuts her off, saying she knows nothing. Inwardly, Davina admits she may not know the details of his mother's murder, but she understands how he feels. She assures Mikey that she's not like any bodyguard he's had before and will do anything to keep him safe, even saving him from his own schemes. She tells him he can hate her or fight her, but he can't escape her. Mikey angrily snatches his jacket from her and says he can try, leaving them staring intensely at each other. When they finally get home, Mikey asks to go to his room. He's allowed to go, but only with Davina following, despite his promise not to run away again. Once in his room, Mikey insists that his father tuck him in when he arrives, and Davina promises to pass on the message. As Mikey falls asleep, Davina exits and sits by his door, reflecting on the exhausting day and the lack of sleep she's had over the past 2 nights. Despite her fatigue, she decides to rest her eyes by his door to ensure he doesn't run off again. Coincidentally, Angelini arrives almost immediately, finding Davina asleep in that position. Mr. Angelini walks into Mikey's room, and Mikey immediately notices his presence, expressing how much he misses his father. Mr. Angelini asks Mikey how his day has been with the nanny, and Mikey responds that he almost ditched her and that she's not so smart. Mikey reveals he was coming to help his father in Dijon, and when his father asks how he knew where he was, Mikey explains that Adam always inputs the GPS coordinates the night before. Such a smart kid, isn't he? They converse for a while before Mr. Angelini sneaks out of the room after Mikey falls asleep. He picks up his shirt, glancing at Davina sleeping on the floor, and remarks that she looks as dangerous as a kitten, yet he knows his son is safe with her. Whispering, he tries to wake her up, and when she finally stirs, he helps her up from the ground, suggesting she should be in bed. Davina seems tired and weak. Nanny mode really takes it out of her. Mr. Angelini mentions that he understands Mikey tried to come after him, and Davina responds by saying she'll put a tracker in Mikey's shoe next time they leave the house. As he leads her to her room, she suddenly pauses, mentioning that he smells like blood. He sarcastically asks if the smell isn't as nice as oranges. Still very sleepy, she asserts that they have to keep Mikey out of all that, and he immediately warns her never to say that out loud again if she values her life. "Did I say it out loud?" she asks, with heavy eyes, before yawning in his face. As she staggers into her room, she says that she can't sleep in the house because someone's always watching, even though she doesn't know how. Then, she falls asleep. Angelini watches her, inwardly noting that she picked up on that already. He thinks she's got sharp instincts, which she'll need for what lies ahead. After that, he walks out of the room. The next morning, Davina reflects on the previous night. She notes that, for once, Mr. Angelini didn't set off any of her internal alarms, and there was no danger or unease. She's always trusted her gut, but as an Angelini, he should be one of the ones she's most afraid of. Looking back, the Angelinis are not what she imagined. Mikey is no victim looking to be saved, and Gabriel Angelini is not just a villain. She understands that the mafia boss wants his son safe, so why bring him to Lion, where he's kicking up a hornet's nest of enemies just by existing? Something doesn't add up, and she can't help but wonder. How can she forget the Elite Nanny Academy's prescription against emotional involvement? Anyway, she grabs her jacket, asserting that there will be no more distractions. It's time to get answers. She heads out of her room, ready to begin her day, only to bump into Mikey, who's speedily running to the pool. She runs after him, unable to understand what is going on, but as she reaches the pool, she's shocked to see her boss in a Speedo. He looks at her and says, "It's pool day." So, here's a quick backstory. The night before, after Angelini had mapped out all his operations, he realized that his work had probably made too strong an impression on his enemies. Deciding to lay low the next day, he planned a sudden pool day. Surprised, Davina wonders why there's a dedicated day for the pool when the pool is always there. She turns to her boss, suggesting that if he's going to be here with his son, now would be a good time for her to access his security systems. He takes off his glasses, leans closer, and reiterates that it's pool day before diving into the water. "What does this have to do with me?" she asks, utterly confused. Suddenly, Adam walks up to her with some clothes. Unable to hold back her curiosity, she asks if this is a scheduled event. He replies that it happens at random, then hands her the clothes. Annoyed, she turns to see her boss swimming and firmly states that she's not staying because she has work to do. Adam laughs loudly and tells her that no one is allowed to leave the pool room once pool day has begun. He further explains that Mikey and his father eat and nap in the pool too. Davina hushes him and insists that she isn't part of it. In the middle of their argument, the chef comes in with a cup of coffee, telling Davina to take it to Angelini. Just as she tries to refuse, Adam pushes her face, saying that the boss is very strict about pool day rules. Realizing there's no way for her to leave, she requests to at least have her laptop. Adam once again informs her that there's no technology on pool day. Before she knows what's going on, Mikey comes up behind her and asks if she wants to dive for rings with him. As if that's not enough, Angelini says, "You aren't thinking about leaving the pool room, are you?" Mikey also adds that pool day is sacred. Left with no choice, she asks where she can change, and her boss quickly points to the bathroom. After changing, she dives into the pool and begins playing with Mikey while Angelini sips his coffee and watches them. A while later, they come out of the pool, and Angelini asks Davina if she's sure she isn't disappointed. He mentions that she seemed geared up to get into his security earlier, suggesting that she might have ulterior motives for getting close to him. Wondering if he's messing with her, she replies by reminding him that he promised her full access. "This isn't enough access for you," he says, smirking. She looks at him, shocked, trying to understand if he just made a joke. Who exactly is this man, she wonders. Just then, Adam comes in to inform Angelini about an urgent issue. At first, the mafia boss tries to ignore it, but Mikey insists that he should go because business can't wait. Before leaving, he instructs Davina to watch after his son. All the while, she notices the change in his demeanor. This isn't just business, he looks scared. Something has definitely changed, but she doesn't know what it is. Angelini, now outside with Adam, strongly asserts that his son can't see this, so he asks him if he caught the plate number. Adam responds by saying that he was in the kitchen and the intruders must have been watching for an opening. It turns out that the Angelinis have just received a visual threat, specifically for the heir, Mikey. The mafia boss tries to ensure that everything is fixed before his son leaves the pool room. Meanwhile, Davina is still trying to keep him company by initiating more games. After a moment of playing and several fails on her end, Mikey laughs and says that she isn't so bad after all. Just then, his father walks in seeking permission to borrow Davina for a bit and also tells him to get Adam if he wants to keep swimming. But since Adam doesn't even get his hair wet, he'd rather just go to his room instead. Davina thinks she finally got through to Mikey because he revealed his favorite meal to her. Well, I hope she's right. Later on, she knocks at Angelini's office, and he invites her in to check out the security footage from an hour ago. She's surprised to learn that he has cameras on the premises, but he assures her that they're only on the external. Is this the truth or a lie? It doesn't matter. This isn't how she expected to get access to his system, but she'll take what she can get regardless. She asks if there's been a security breach, and he only responds by tapping on the system and revealing the threat he received earlier. After mentioning that it's a threat to Mikey, she begins analyzing the whole situation and inquires if he was able to get a face on camera. He commends her ability to zoom in on the security footage, revealing the intruder's tattoo while she reveals that he has managed to make an enemy of the local bratva in less than a month. Furthermore, she adds that unless the Don has an existing blood feud with the Russian Brotherhood, she doesn't see them making threats without provocation. So, he's either blundered onto their territory without realizing it or he has something they want. With a more serious tone, she turns to him with her arms folded and asks, "Just what are you doing in Lyon, Mr. Angelini?" He jokingly responds by saying that he's making friends and influencing people. This isn't a joke, she says, but he turns the table and directs a question at her. How does a nanny know so much about organized crime? At this moment, she realizes that she has said too much, so she clears her throat and replies that she did her research before accepting the position. But that's an obvious lie because she was in Angelini's car less than an hour after he applied for her services. She tries again, this time she claims that some things are common knowledge. Furious, he grabs her face and questions why she's lying when it only makes her look guilty. He grips her shoulder and demands that she tell him the truth or else she'd be out of the house because he won't have a liar protecting his son. Inwardly worried, she mentions that she needs to give him something, but she can't let him know that she's there to investigate her parents' assassination. With 5 seconds left to spill the truth, she begins saying that it could get her in trouble and she'd be ruined if anyone found out. Angelini assures her that the one with the power to ruin her right away is him, so she should tell him the truth. To her surprise, he asks if she's in a gang, a syndicate, a rival mafia, or if she's here to spy on him. She quickly looks away and mentions that she's just a freelancer. Trying to hold in her laughter, she explains that she's a freelance hacker and she does a little black hat on the side when she needs the cash. Nothing heinous, I'd never hurt anyone. I just find people mostly, she says, trying to sell her false story to him. In addition, she states that she doesn't get involved with known criminal organizations, no syndicates, gangs, or mobsters, but she's in the darknet message boards. Subsequently, he asks if her headmistress knows about this and she responds by saying she's just good with computers and he shouldn't tell her. While she's still wondering if he believes her story or not, he says that he won't tell if she finds someone for him. He then turns the system to her, showing her the intruder, and gives her the rest of the day to work on it while he watches Mikey. All the while, a thought lingers in her head: the mafia boss was so quick to believe her, and what he asked for his silence is something she would have done anyway. He even gave her a tablet connected to his internal network when most people would have reservations about trusting an admitted hacker. Could this be another one of his tests? She unlocks the tablet, about to begin her work, but she notices a mirroring program installed in it. Now it's confirmed that she's being watched. On the other hand, in Venice, Italy, Angelini's uncle, the Don, has just been informed that there's a bit of a problem. When he inquires what it is, the messenger tells him that the mirroring software on the Annex network is picking up some very unusual keystrokes. He thinks Angelini found the spyware, but the Don seems rather unfazed. The young messenger adds that if Angelini understands what to look for in his tablet, then he will uninstall it. The Don confidently says that Gabriel Angelini knows better than to interfere wherever he's concerned, and he learned that lesson the hard way. As Davina continues to work to identify the intruder, she decides to take a break to go check on Mikey. Just as she's about to do that, her system reveals the intruder. In the meantime, Mikey is seen peeking at the cleaner through the window when Adam comes in and pulls him down. After speaking to him briefly, Mikey dashes off. Amid all the chaos, Davina is still trying to wrap her head around the identity of this intruder when Angelini walks in, questioning if she has found him. As she shows him the person on her system, he compliments her speed on the job. But then she mentions that there's something odd. The current guy in the picture has no tattoos like the person captured from the security camera. Though the mafia boss thinks that it isn't the same person, Davina is almost certain that it's the same guy, but with a fake tattoo. She thinks that the guy wanted Angelini to see the tattoo to point his ire toward an obvious culprit, the Bratva. She goes on revealing all her discoveries about the intruder, leading her boss to request the current location of the guy. Noting her competence so far, he makes a comment saying that he knew he made the right choice hiring her. "Well done, Davina, let me know when you have his location," he says as he walks out of the room, but she quickly stops him. She asks what he means by that statement, so he explains that he correctly estimated her worth and it is a compliment. Not convinced, she begins spilling that she's noted how unusual it is for the Elite Nanny Academy to send a junior nanny to this sort of assignment, and the headmistress only offered her the contract because he asked for her directly. "Why did you choose me?" she curiously asks, and he replies by saying that her profile highlights her computer skills. She holds her head in disbelief and says that somehow he knew she was a hacker and he even guilted her into admitting it. She tries to warn that she's not going to use her abilities to help him expand his crime syndicate, but Mikey abruptly bursts in, cutting short their conversation. In a tense moment, the little boy demands to know what is going on, but his father assures him that it's nothing to concern himself with. Still not satisfied, Mikey climbs on his teddy bear and asks his father not to lie to him. He begins listing his observations. Adam won't let him go outside. The housekeeper took a bottle of bleach to the front gate. There are 2 guards at the back door instead of 1, and now he and the nanny are conspiring. In a bid to sway him, the mafia boss explains that the second guard is in training. Signora Conti is the housekeeper who cleans things, and he was just reminding Davina what her job duties entail. All the while, she just stares at him angrily while he hoists his son, still trying to convince him that he's only protecting him by any means necessary. Then he turns to Davina and asks, "Isn't that right?" expecting her to cooperate with him. Still mad at him, she quickly recalls Headmistress Bremerton's instructions and advice to obey the primary client. So she inwardly asserts that if there's a threat to Mikey, she has to act even if it plays right into his father's hands. The story is about to get real interesting. Please let us know if you'd like us to continue. And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next one.